So now I'm going to begin kind of the quick review of the things that we were studying. So what we're basically doing is a review of a correlation in the heavenly yeshiva, the Mesivta, that it introduces to us the correlations between the Mikdash Me'at, between the sanctuary, the different things in the sanctuary, like the bima, like the Torah scroll, and what they represent in the Sefirot, and how they are somehow connected to the Beit HaMikdash. So that's kind of what we're coming off of. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of continue in that vein. But now we're going to work into another correlation. And this correlation is going to be between the Gan Eden and the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to synthesize the different things in Gan Eden, such as the Eitz Hadas, right? And the fruits of the Eitz Hadas into being part of the Beit HaMikdash, okay? And who's going to be the replacement of the Kohen? No, I don't want to say the replacement for the Kohen Gadol, but who are we going to be emphasizing here is the King Mashiach. Side note, it's great that we picked this section of the Zohar, because guess what? There's a little bonus. It talks about Noach in this section, with an emphasis on the dove of Noach, the idea of the olive, the connection between olive, of the olive branch to the olive tree that has a messianic connotation, and the dove between, the fluttering wings of the dove representing the kind of Shechina and the coming of the Mashiach, something that we often associate with Christian icons, but it actually is a medrash and a Zohar based on the section of reading of Parshas Noach of the dove and its significance. So a lot of, not a lot of times, but there are definitely times where Christianity and Judaism have common symbols that perhaps maybe because they're Christian, also Jews will actually kind of refrain from using them. They think they're already taken, which is a good question. What do you do when we have a shared image of something that has perhaps something similar but not the same? Do we feel like people will misassociate it and think they're
like the Mashiach?
Some Jews don't want to talk about Mashiach because they think that already got taken from us. So that's an interesting question. I'm not really going to dwell on it because it's not really the topic of the Zohar per se, but it's an interesting thing. And then of course we're going to be talking about a common theme, which is the Yesod. How we're gonna do some wordplay. Yira kol zechurcha, the males shall appear in the court 3 times a year to be reread as your maleness, the aspect of your being a man, which means our self-control in the area of Yesod is important to being able to so to speak, enter into the sacred temple and what that means. We mentioned before, for example, the custom of the sixth aliyah being connected to Yesod. And we were talking about earlier Abraham, Isaac, and particularly Jacob as Ish Tam, the difference between Abraham and Jacob in terms of their wholeness is associated with their relationship with Yesod and with the Brit, with the covenant. Okay, so there's going to be one of the most psychedelic sections of the Zohar, to my knowledge, is what we're going to be studying today, that describes a wider range, array of visual things, colors, and music, and animals, and eagles, and the dove, and just kind of a reimagining of this merger between the temple, certain visions of the prophets of the temple, and the Garden of Eden in a very kind of psychedelic way. So this is, I have no idea what it means when it talks about a lot of these things. You'd probably want to watch it in a visual form, a movie form, after meditating to figure out what it is. But it often uses words like a beauty that's like unimaginable or more beautiful than anything else in the world. So that type of kind of hyperbole or just like comes up again and again in today's section. Okay. So let's start with Rabbi Shimon. This is a good link between what we did the last time, even though we did this as well. I believe we did all of page 81 and probably finished 81 and went into 82, but it's a good link in terms of last time we were talking about the chazan of the synagogue getting the sixth getting the sixth aliyah, which is what we're about to talk about. So Rabbi Shimon said,
Rabbi Shimon,
surely for all his life he ascended only sixth amongst those ascending, meaning he always took the sixth aliyah on Shabbos. And why? Because that's Yesod. The righteous one runs in it, which is a quote of a verse. In the Torah scroll runs the word of the righteous one. The Gemara tells us in Brachos that one of the sages said, how do I know if my prayer is going to be accepted? If it flows, meaning if it just kind of comes out of my mouth without any interruption. It's just going. What does that mean? Perhaps what you could say is Yesod represents a certain sexual energy where when it goes, it flows. It's just magic. It just happens. So in that sense, the sixth aliyah is the righteous one runs in it. The Torah scroll runs the words of the righteous one. When you and the Torah scroll just run, it's just like there's a merger where you don't know who's the reader and what's being read, as if they're like one and the same. So that's the sixth aliyah. That's the Yesod. I'll just say one thing. One way to understand it very simply is there's certain people who have this power and others don't. Why is that? It's because it's chemistry, spiritual chemistry. In other words, who gets to talk to God? The person who is the tzaddik. The tzaddik isn't simply the righteous person. It's the person who has the chemistry, the divine chemistry. You hearing me?
Yeah.
And not everyone has it, because it's about having that like intimacy with God, which is like Yesod. Okay, and it is secure. The Torah scroll runs the words of this righteous one. Go ahead.
V'nisgav miman medechilu demalach hamaves ha'orich yomim.
And from what? Like, what's the fear? What would it not be secure of? From the fear of the angel of death. For he lived a long life.
V'nisgav delo yisnezak la'olmen.
And is secure that it will never, ever be harmed. Okay, we'll read one more paragraph and then Zev will read those notes from 77.
B'hahu migdal desalka bein inun migdalin.
In the tower rising amongst those towers.
Kaima nehiru chad b'diyukna de Sefer Torah.
Stands a radiance, a shining, in the image or in the same way, appearing as a Torah scroll.
Kad aseh hahutzi para natla hahu migdal me'asre.
When a bird comes, now we were talking about birds before and other creatures, it takes that tower from its place.
V'koim go emtsoisa de azara go gatfe de kruven hava.
And sets it in the middle of the courtyard beneath the wings of the kruvim. Now we know the most famous kruvim are the kruvim that are found on the top of the Ark of the Covenant, but there's other kruvim in the Beit HaMikdash as well that appear in other places. And in this section of the Zohar, the kruvim are all over, meaning there's hundreds of kruvim, thousands. The kruvim that we see on the top of the parochet of the Aron are the most important, but they're by far not the only one.
Rumei l'rum shemaya ma'ich va'ol tachos inun kruven.
Where its height has reached the loft of the heavens, it now descends, entering beneath those wings.
V'shuroi ben reishei kruven.
Its walls between the head of the kruvim. Okay, let's read the notes, starting from 77, Zev.
All his life he ascended only sixth. Rabbi Kruspedai insisted on always being called up as the sixth one to the Torah. As this righteous one chanted from the Torah scroll, he read fluently, his words running in it. Based on this account, it was considered a great honor to receive the sixth Aliyah. Chaim Vital writes to his teacher, Isaac Luria, also about his teacher. I also saw that on every Sabbath day, he would go up to the Torah only as the sixth one. And then 78, from fear of the angel of death, as evidenced by Rabbi Kruspedai, who lived to an old age. And it gives a reference. And then 79, in the tower rising, the spiritual messenger continues his description. A bird comes and takes this tower, setting it in the middle of the courtyard of the heavenly temple. On the tower, see previous notes. The placement of the tower in the middle of the courtyard corresponds to the placement of the pulpit in the middle of the synagogue.
So just to jog our memories, there's a verse in Proverbs that says, the name of God is a tower of strength. The righteous one runs into it and is secure. So we're now unpacking that verse. The running into it is the desire of Yesod, which is for that to be coupled with it. And there in it is the security. And we're going to talk about basically Yesod. When you use Yesod effectively, spiritually speaking, it provides some type of security. So we're going to get back. That's going to come back again. Like, how does that work, and who's providing the security? But again, that came into play here again.
Is there a connotation here based on that footnote that really we look at the bima as like it's a bima? It's just something that's supposed to hold the Torah, but almost the way the footnote is describing it, it's like a little bit poetic or whatever. But the bima is sort of like the manifestation already of the Torah, which is a little bit like what this is kind of saying. It lifts up the center thing, moves it to the center. And if that's the case, maybe that's why there's always been like, when there were reform and like moving of the bima was like a very sensitive thing. So it could make sense sort of on a basic level where it was like sort of churchian or just doing like someone else was doing or just changing what was done. But if it's more than that, it's like the Torah itself, like there's more connoted or connotated with the centralism of the bima, because you can't have the Torah out of the ark, right? It has to be there. But really what we're saying by having a bima there is it's almost like the Torah is always really there too, in the center. But what are you going to do? Put the ark in the middle? Like it just doesn't fit. So you put it in the front. But we don't want to, we don't sort of want to change that because that has, I don't know, does that make any sense or?
Yeah, I mean, one way to understand it is if you study the Talmud, even in the Shulchan Aruch, there's a whole section about the Kedushas Beis HaMedrash, Kedushas Beis HaKnesses, the sanctity of the synagogue. And in it kind of delineates these type of things, that the person davening, the chazan should be davening milamakim karasicha from a lower place, but then the Torah reading should be on a bima, on a raised platform, and it has many restrictions about the use of a synagogue. So much so that now there's most lay people don't even know this, that when you build a synagogue, the board, the rabbi are supposed to like say, we're building it without that degree of sanctity so that we'll be able to use it for social events, for the kiddush. You're not even supposed to really eat in a synagogue. So the only reason why we have social events or non-holy events in the synagogue is based on a heter, essentially, based on a later rabbinic kind of way around it. So yes, Ben, you're absolutely correct that there was a lot of fights about the change in the synagogue, not just in the service, but in the architecture, so to speak. And yes, the Zohar specifically mentioned the Tower of Strength is the teva, is the pulpit, and the Torah scrolls. So you're right, it's not just the Torah scroll, it's just correct. So, and then there's the inner Heichal, where the Torah emerges from. So all of these things in the Beit HaKnesset are, like I said, correlating to Sefirot, which also correlate to specific places and aspects of the Beit HaMikdash. So,
Rabbi Citron, does but getting back to the architecture of this, the two major differences, between Ashkenazic and the Sephardic is about whether the raised area is in the center or in the front.
right.
And I was wondering if this, I never thought of it in the tower here, but is it about the Sephardic design that they're imagining it coming toward this raised area in the center?
Well, definitely the bima here would be raised. Bima means raised, a platform.
Right, but as far as the position,
Yeah,
whether it's a
Tama.
Sephardic design or whether it's an Ashkenazic design in this regard.
Yeah, I don't know. Not sure. Oh, by the way, we're going to get the women's section is going to get an honorable mention later on. So even the men's section and the women's section also come into play in a very interesting way as we get further into this. Okay, so now we do 300 openings there. Oh, actually, no, did I skip? No, 300 openings. You have it, Ben?
Bahu, yeah. Bahu, oh, sorry about that. Excuse me. Klas mea pischin taman, bepischa de emtsa isa.
Okay, in the middle opening,
Kaima nehira da de yukna de sefer Torah.
stands in glowingness the image of a Torah scroll,
Bezamen melech Yisrael lemikre beparshas Hakel.
in which the future king of Israel is destined to read the section of Hakel. that describes the Jews assembling at the end or after Sukkot of the 7th year.
V'do leheve malka Mashiach below achara.
That will be the King Mashiach. The next king that we're talking about will be Mashiach and no other.
Ubahu sefer Torah da'ahu nihiru yichasida kadisha.
And in that Torah scroll of illumination, next page,
Yichasida kadisha zaka ihu demipume yishmu.
O holy pious one, happy is the one who will hear from his mouth the lovely sound of his words.
Kol ne'imu demiloi mi'inu milan destimen de parish ba'araisa.
Of the hidden matters of Torah that he's going to expound on, he's going to explain.
B'chol reish yarche v'shabate mo'adaya v'zimnaya.
On every new moon, this is based on a biblical verse, on the Shabbos, on the festival, and the holiday. And the biblical verse is not talking about the King Mashiach per se, but it's talking about hearing, these sacred days when all of the members of the academies wish to ascend on high to the heavenly academy. They all gather around the King Mashiach on those special days. He explains matters, and through the sweetness of his words, they ascend yearning. In other words, they go up, but that the words draw them even further higher up than their original kind of ability to get to.
Kulu eser milan genizon lach mi'inon milan diu parish liyomadish elton dilach.
All these 10 matters, I guess it's referencing something from before, questions that he had before, amount to the matters that he explains are treasured away for you for the day that you have questions. Okay, let's read note 80 and 81. 80 is is on the page before.
80, 300 openings in that tower. According to Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 10 through 13, every 7 years on the festival of Sukkot, this Torah, referring to the portions or all of Deuteronomy, was to be read publicly. The Mishnah stipulates that the king of Israel should perform the reading, consisting of various passages from Deuteronomy. Here the Zohar indicates that the king was to read specifically the portion of Hakel, which refers to Deuteronomy itself. Or Deuteronomy 31, 10 through 13.
31st chapter, yeah.
Right. Furthermore, the king of Israel now refers to King Messiah, who chants from the heavenly radiant Torah scroll. The association of the number 300 with the tower recalls the Talmudic passage in Hagiga and Sanhedrin, where the phrase counter of the towers in Isaiah is interpreted as one who counted 300 fixed laws concerning a tower flying in the air. This obscure image apparently refers to a tower-shaped chest or vehicle, perhaps not directly touching the ground, but supported by posts. The 300 laws are related to the ritual purity or impurity of the contents of the tower.
That's
on the flying tower, see elsewhere in Zohar and Moshe Leon.
Okay. Note 81.
81, O holy pious one. The spiritual messenger addresses Rabbi Shimon, describing how King Messiah will chant from the Torah and explains its deeper meaning. When Rabbi Shimon eventually asks questions about how many of these secrets answers will be provided. On holy days, the souls dwelling in the academies of the earthly Garden of Eden ascend to the heavenly academy headed by Metatron.
Okay.
Kadkaima hahu migdal bemsa'u de azara.
When the tower stands in the middle of the courtyard, and this is the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, at this point, we're not sure anymore. When does it talking about Beit HaMikdash, the Le'ela? What is it talking about? The spiritual Beit HaMikdash in heaven. And when is it going to be talking about some point in the future in the actual Beit HaMikdash. So that's going to become less and less clear when we're passing from here. It seems we're still, it's introduced the concept of Mashiach in the future and then goes back into the present in the spiritual realms.
But it's definitely not retrospecting on the Beit HaMikdash like that was.
No,
Right.
not. Okay, go on. The tower stands in the middle of the courtyard, and this opening, this window opens, aperture opens.
Upischa da pasach paschen inun keruvim pumayu uparse gadvayu.
Those cheruvim, those angels, they open their mouth and they spread their wings.
V'nahya nehiru ilo ala hupischa.
And a radiance, a higher radiance, he translates it as a supernal radiance, illumines that opening.
V'hu sefer Torah pasiach v'inun keruvim pasche v'amre.
And that Torah scroll is open, and these cheruvim open, saying,
Morav tovcha asher tzafanta l'rei'echa.
how abundant is your goodness that you have hidden for those who fear you or revere you.
Sagiru pischin v'sefer Torah isgalo.
Okay, I'll just continue the verse in English. He doesn't have the whole verse there. That you have wrought for us, you have wrought for those who shelter in you before the eyes of humankind. That's in Tehillim 31:20, Psalms. Back to you. And then opening close, and the Torah scroll is rolled up. In other words, it's reminiscent of when we open the ark and close the ark, although here the ark, the metaphysical ark closes and then the Torah scroll is rolled up. So read, there's not much to read, so we'll continue before the notes.
Man chama.
Who has seen the brilliant radiance of that Torah scroll?
Nehira nahar da hu sefer Torah kulei nahara de nahir asvan
All
dulei.
light, all luminous light. Its letters, flames of fire.
Shalhove de esha me arba gavne.
A fire in 4 colors
The inun de alma ilah.
of the higher worlds,
Kulu balte umenatz
all sticking
natze.
out and sparkling.
Les man de yachil lamekam behu bar Mashiach.
No one can stand before it except for the Mashiach. Okay, wonderful. Like this is the beginning of these kind of images that we were talking about before. You're going to see more of them. Notes 82 and 83, Zev.
82 says on this aperture opens the middle opening of the tower, as mentioned above in note 80. 83, in 4 colors, the supernal world: white, red, green, and blue, corresponding respectively to Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and Shekhinah. On protruding and sparkling letters, see elsewhere in the Zohar. The phrase "can endure them" renders L'mekem beho, which can also be translated "can fathom them."
Okay. So now we're on page 83. The opening closes.
Agir pischada keruvim mishtacheche.
The Kruvim subside.
Hu migdal parach v'kaima ba'asrei bein shar migdalim.
And that tower flies, taking its place amongst the rest of the towers. So this is very much like Star Trek. You know, if you were reading the Zohar in a more literal level, like, okay.
So now there's a gap, basically. That's what we're saying. It's moved, so now is that sort of the transition to the next piece, Bahu Pischa? Or not so much?
Now there's a question of how we get from that to this next thing. Okay.
It's like one plane took off, so now another plane can land.
Yeah. Correct. So once we're getting into this idea of these openings, we're going to introduce the idea of the crown of the Mashiach.
Bahu Piskadem Tsaisa is Atar de Paz Iloha Yakira Geniza.
That middle opening is a crown of gold, very expensive, very precious,
The
hidden,
lows
not seen.
has a hashta, Galifa Umukukaka Becholzine Abne Yukar.
It's inlaid and engraved with all kinds of gems.
Uzamina Lemehevi Al Resha, Tamaka Mashiach.
That's set aside to be put on the head of the King Mashiach.
Katselak Bahu Migdal,
When he goes up on that tower,
Usrain Nisharan da Misitrada, Vida Misitrada, not Lele Vidai.
one on one side, one on the other, grasp it, the not the Mashiach, the crown, with their talons.
Katselak Malka Mashiach,
When King Mashiach will go up,
Mistuknin Nisharan Vinatle Atarada,
the eagles will get ready and take this crown.
Bishata the Yisrael Mikre,
At the moment he begins to read, I guess,
Yes,
we
but-
were talking about that, the role of the King Mashiach as the Torah reader.
Yispesach Pischa Achra,
Another window, another opening will open,
Umitaman Tipo Kahiyona, the Shudder
from
no
which will come out the dove sent by Noah. For some reason, Rabbi Shlomo used to love this medrash about the olive branch had that the dove in the time of Noah took. There's some medrash that says that that was the olive branch, that the oil that the Chashmonayim found for the Pach Hashemen, the oil that that they lit on Hanukkah was taken from that branch.
He connected it to what Yaakov went back for, the small things Yaakov left behind.
Katanim. Okay, nice. So now we're going even further with that. Not only do you've got that the olive oil from the branch that the dove of Noah plucked, but you even have the actual. Again, this is all like medrash, so don't necessarily get hung up on the facts here. It's not the Democratic Party. We're not claiming to be the party of science here. That's a new tagline for the Democratic Party, right? We're basically, we are science. So we're not science. We're not Trump either. It's our own thing. Which is that the dove is going to reemerge, that dove, whatever that means. Again, the bechina, the level of whatever the dove represents.
Tichsev Vayeshalach Esayona,
As it is written, and this is, like I said, this is our bonus. We get to read about Parshas Noach in this section of the Zohar. This is in this Parsha, Genesis 8:8. And he sent out the dove, right? He wanted to see whether it was dried enough for them to go out of the teva.
Hayona Hahi the Ishtamada.
So the way it says the dove is like the famous dove, the renowned one,
V'lo Malilu Ba Kadmai, V'lo Yodu Mahi,
which the ancient ones did not mention, and whose identity they did not know. It was known, but it wasn't known. I mean, they didn't mention it. It wasn't like, what do you mean, the dove? It was the dove, even though we haven't talked about it yet. They didn't really quite get it. It was so mysterious.
Elamei Hacha Nafkas V'avda Shlichusa.
But from here, she went forth and she did her mission. Okay, notes 84, 85.
Is the notion, I'm sorry, is the notion that it's like the thing that they didn't know, that it's almost like after the Mabul, it's like a moment of creation in order to, it's like this is a thing from nothing. It's an unknown thing. And that's like that begins the trajectory of like the new sort of recreated or allowed to continue, but still created by this like new Yonah that wasn't part of creation until then.
Well, according to this, it was there. It was known and not known at the same time, meaning it's the special, even though we haven't mentioned it until now,
I see. Ishtamodel, yeah.
the known and unknown dove. But what you're talking about in terms of the flood is correct, that there's a certain recreation story in the aftermath of what happens afterward. Okay, go ahead, Zev.
So 84, the tower flies. On the image of a flying tower, see above. Note 85, when King Messiah will ascend the tower. When he begins to chant from the radiant Torah scroll, a dove will emerge. This dove, who now plays a messianic role, is the very same one sent out by Noah from the ark. He sent out the dove to see whether the waters had abated from the surface of the ground. According to the Zohar, by specifying the dove, Scripture alludes to this renowned bird who went forth on her mission for Noah from this heavenly tower. On the messianic role of the dove, compare it to the Gospel of Mark. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Then he came up out of the water. Immediately he saw the heavens open and the Spirit descending upon him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am very pleased." And then compare that to Chagiga, where it says, in the name of Ben Zoma, I was gazing between the upper waters and the lower waters, and there is merely 3 fingers' breadth between them, as is said, and the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters, like a dove hovering over her young without touching them.
Okay. Great stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, more needs to be looked into in terms of this Jewish version of this kind of specialness of this dove. Okay, back to the main text. During the time. During the time, going back to the dove, what is written, and she did not return to him again, meaning when he sent out the dove for the last time.
Lo yada barnash la'an azlas.
No one knew where she had gone.
V'hitavas la'asra.
But she returned to her place, meaning spiritually, the level that she represented.
V'isganizas bepischada v'ihi titol atara b'pumaha.
And was hidden away in this opening that we're talking about now. This opening is where she went. And she'll take the crown in her mouth and place it on the head of King Mashiach.
Mate v'lo mate.
This is a great expression in the Zohar that's often quoted in certain later texts. Mati v'lo mati. She reaching and not reaching, touching yet not touching.
Kidang siv tashas larosho ateres puz.
Of then it is written, you'll set on his head a crown of pure gold. Okay, note 86, Ev.
86.
Which is extensively just quoting from the Parsha.
Yeah. And she did not return to him again. The first time Noah sent the dove, she found no resting place for her foot, and she returned to the ark, for there was water all over the earth. The second time, 7 days later, the dove came back to him, and toward the evening look, a plucked olive wreath was in its bill, and Noah knew that the waters had abated from the earth. The following verse reads, he waited still another 7 days, and sent out the dove, and she did not return to him again. According to the Zohar, having completed her mission, the dove returned to the heavenly tower, waiting there for her messianic role. The crown hovers just above the Messiah's head or barely touches his hair. The phrase, mate vilamate, touching yet not touching, appears elsewhere in the Zohar to describe the highest stages of emanation.
Okay. Great. So we are now on page 84 at the top.
Is the emphasis of the touching and not touching about the crown vis-a-vis Mashiach, or about the dove putting it on the Mashiach's head, or both? It's more obvious, I think, about the crown, but is there something about like the dove not kind of like
I
connecting
think it's
with
on
the
the dove.
Oh,
Because
it is on the dove?
the reason why I think it's on the dove is because that's the verse that's quoted in the name of Ben Zoman Chagiga. The Spirit of God hovered above the face of the water like a dove hovering over her young without touching them. So that would fit in
Mhm.
to be going on the dove itself. Now the dove is the hovering, is the one that touches and doesn't touch.
Okay, because the footnote sounded like what Zev was reading. It sounded like it was talking about the crown, I thought. And I thought that was strange.
That
I
is
thought it was
correct.
the dove.
The crown, you could arguably say that the reason why the dove is delivering the crown is because the dove represents the touching that doesn't touch.
Right,
And the crown may also represent the touching that doesn't touch.
right,
So it's
right.
like one and energetically
Yeah,
linking to the other. So it could be both, actually.
right. Yeah, that's what
In other
it
words, so that
sounded.
you don't have to choose between, I'm right or Danny Matt is right. No, we're both right, like the famous story with the husband and the wife fighting, and the rabbi says, "You're right," and you're right.
Yeah.
The rabbi says, they can't both be right. You're also right. Okay.
The Kavan the Yikre Malka Mashiach b'Sefer Torah.
As soon as the king Mashiach reads the Torah scroll,
Yikumun Shrein Nasharan.
the two eagles will get up,
Damikan b'Damikan.
one on this side, one on the other.
V'Yona Ma'ich.
The dove lowering herself,
Umalka Mashiach Nachis.
and King Mashiach goes down
The Itral Reshe.
with the crown on his head
Ad Darga Basro.
to the last level,
Usrein Nasharan Parchin La'ela Al Reshe.
and the two eagles fly above his head.
V'Yona Tavas v'Atara B'Puma.
And the dove returns the crown in her mouth.
V'Kablon La Elaine Shrein Nasharan.
Those two eagles welcoming her. So again, it's the messianic story and the ending of the flood, or the rebuilding of the world, are really, the symbolism is one and the same. The dove is the one who plucks the olive branch, and here the dove is the one who plucks the King Mashiach's crown, or carries it. As the King Mashiach descends all the way down, which represents the place that was flooded before, that was in desolation before, is now accessible to the redemption of Mashiach. Okay, let's read a little more.
David Malka.
David the king,
Zayas Ranon Ikre Kame Kucha Berechu.
called a juicy olive tree, a verdant. What's a verdant mean?
Green,
Green?
I think so. Like lush.
I'll
Yeah.
second that.
Okay. So it's a green olive tree.
Dechsev Ani Kazais or Kazayas Ranon Beves, I guess Hashem. I don't know. I don't know the rest of the
In the
pasuk.
presence of the Holy One, as it is written, I am like a Zais Ranan, a verdant olive tree in the house of God.
Ale Zayas Dom Malka
It's
Mashiach.
Psalms 52:10. Ale Zais, a verdant olive tree, is King Mashiach, son of David.
V'da'iu Derames Yona Da B'Yomai Denoach.
And that is what this day intimated in the days of Noah. In other words, this is already being foreshadowed by Noah, as it is written.
Dechsev V'Hine Ale Zayas Taraf B'Fiha.
And look, a plucked olive leaf was torn out, was in her mouth.
Hahu Ale Zayas Taraf B'Chataf Li'Yikara Dilei.
That's verse 11 in chapter 8 of Genesis. She snatched or plucked that olive leaf for his glory.
B'Ma B'Piha.
How? Bethia, with her mouth. Again, mouth
D'Kaimal.
is, like we said before, the Torah reader is the Yisod, is the person who runs into the Torah, runs with desire towards Torah. For it rests on his head,
Umakabla Yikar Mehayona V'Hai.
and he receives honor, glory from this dove.
V'haidichsiv taraf below tarfa.
And that's why it's written Taraf, he plucked, even though we're talking, you notice before we said that the dove is a female dove. Now the word Taraf is masculine rather than Tarfa, she plucked. Well, like a male acting valiantly. In the olden days, they used to say that the men were men and the women were not men. Nowadays we say, I have no idea, but so let's just continue.
The
And
Mesivta
together.
there are key.
In the heavenly academy, it is taught Yona, a dove, is masculine.
Migo de ikra Yona.
Yet, since it is called Yona, it is sometimes written as feminine and sometimes as masculine, as when it receives this glory. In other words, generally it's feminine, except when it does a masculine type of activity, like it does here, where it does this great act. Okay, let's read notes 87 through 89.
Maybe the Yona is the symbolism for the confusion during the time right before Mashiach. It's like the combination gender, right? Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that.
Thank you, Ben. Pan, whatever. I don't know. I'm very confused with all these different.
My point was we can blame it on the Yona.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Zeb. Start with 87, please.
Okay, 87. The King Messiah descends from the high tower to its bottom level. The dove removes the crown from the Messiah's head and returns to its place in the middle opening of the tower. 88. King David, the progenitor of the Messiah, is called a verdant olive tree, while the Messiah himself is David's offshoot, an olive leaf. In the aftermath of the flood, the dove plucked an olive leaf, signifying a wreath to crown the Messiah. According to Midrashic tradition, the dove brought the olive leaf from the Garden of Eden. The full verse in Genesis reads, the dove came back to him toward evening, and look, Alezai Taraf, and plucked an olive leaf, and a plucked olive leaf was in her bill or mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had abated from the earth. Why is it written Taraf, he plucked? As mentioned in the previous note, the verse reads, the dove came back to him toward evening, and look, Alezai's Taraf, a plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. Although in this verse the word Taraf functions as an adjective, plucked, the Zohar construes it here as a masculine verb, he plucked an olive leaf. In the Heavenly Academy, it was taught that the dove sent by Noah was masculine, but since the word Yonah, dove, is normally feminine, elsewhere in this biblical passage, it appears with feminine verbs and suffixes, whereas here it appears as with a masculine verb, taraf, he plucked an olive leaf, befitting the valiant act of obtaining this messianic leaf. The formulation, yet since it is called Yonah, it is sometimes written as feminine and sometimes as masculine, derives from Rashi on this verse.
Okay. Great. Page 85.
Migdal da kad tov la'asre.
When this tower returns to its place,
Nahir can you hear the Eina Deshimsha?
it shines like the radiance of the eye of the sun,
Dichsiv kiso kashemesh negdi.
as is written, his throne like the sun before me. Right, it's a verse in Psalms 89:37.
The after kursia achra leheve le benisin va'asan raverven.
Although he will have another throne with great miracles and wonders.
Bereish migdal da.
Okay, read, it's a small notes, but it's just has the end of that verse, 90, Zev.
When this tower returns to its place, after King Messiah reads from the Torah, see above notes 80 through 87. The full verse in Psalms, recording God's promise to King David, reads, his seat shall be forever and his throne like the sun before me.
Okay. Now, this is another one of those things where I told you that it's the sights and the sounds are unparalleled. Nothing like it. Nothing is beautiful. Okay, ready? As the
Barash
top of this tower, at
is
the top of
hof
the tower are birds
the nur
of
de
fire
kamitzafzvan.
who chirp as
Katz-
morning rises.
Katzelet safra tzifzufa de neimu de las neimu v'niguna kahu neimu.
A lovely chirping, or what do birds, they sing, with loveliness that is unmatched by any song, by any melody. They're the most beautiful bird songs. Above them all,
La'ela mikulu zinu nacharanan v'shafnina nacharanan.
other species, other birds, and turtle doves flying in the air.
The kaparchem avira salke v'nachte nachte
Going up
v'salte.
and they're going down. They're going
Love is-
down, they're going up.
V'lo mishtachin
They're
la'omen.
not settling down.
Asvan Ravravan v'asvan zeiran parchem beinayim.
Small letters and big letters flying amongst them.
Ichasida kadisha
O holy pious one,
b'shata da asvan parchen
when the letters fly,
chame barnash ba'asvan Ravravan.
a person can see written in the big letters
Ksiv ba'avira lefum shata.
in the air for a moment what's written,
Bereshis
such as the verse, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashemayim v'sa'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. You can see it for a moment.
batshe asvan zeiran behu uparchen.
The small letters hit them and they fly. They fly in opposite direction.
V'schaze
Like
minayim.
one another. And what is written? V'haaretz haiso tov v'vo b'choshech abnei tehom. The earth was tohu,
Void.
void, empty. A lot of stuff on this, and darkness. So there's idea of the big letters and the little letters. It comes up a lot in the Zohar.
This is not like the big cows eating the small cows, or the
No, but it's kind of a Kabbalistic dialectic where you have these oppositional forces. You notice how it says they hit one another. So it's like one, and they're going in opposite directions and crashing into one another, and they're different. So it's almost like opposing ideas that interact and come up with something else. That's a very common theme, and not just in the Zohar, but later in the Lurianic Kabbalah and other Kabbalah, of this concept of kind of these creation coming from these kind of clashing verses, clashing sefirot or orot or kelim that clash. Not just the famous world of Tohu, but well beyond that.
V'schaze minayu ksiv. I think I may have a little bit of a different text.
Small letters return and strike them, and there it is written in them, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia. You have that?
Yeah. Vayomer Elokim Yehi
Hashem said,
Or.
let there be firmament.
Yar Elokim es ha'or.
God saw the light,
L'basar mahadre asvan zeiran.
and then the small letters came. It's not in my in the Danny Matt edition, but it's in yours, so it's fine. Keep going.
Ubatshe ba'asvan Ravavan.
And crashed into or struck the bigger letters.
U'mischaze minayu d'chsiv. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia.
Okay, and we saw this verse that we just read. Yeah.
V'chein kol ovada de bereshis.
And so to all of the creation story parts,
Pelion Ravavan.
there's the bigger letters.
V'chedu la'aynon ovadan da'asvan ilain. Or v'chedu la'aynon ovadan.
Great marvels and delights of the eye.
Zakah ama dekolda mechakon.
Happy are the people who await all of this. In other words, when Mashiach comes, this is already happening, but we can't see it. When Mashiach comes, we'll be able to see stuff like this. Okay.
Chasida Kadisha,
Oh, holy pious one, Chassid,
Man the Nutter Baris,
whoever guards the bris, the covenant,
Shavile Abasroi,
places himself behind him
Vi'ihu Lakama,
while he is in the front, right? Who was that like? I guess like Noah, right? That it says that Noah walked before God. Now you might ask,
Man Nutter
who protects him
Lachora,
from behind?
Hanatira Rav Ilo Mikola, the Nutter Le.
Or I guess he's behind the covenant, so who's got his back? Well, the greatest and highest protection guards him. And who was that?
Man Iu Tzadik Ilo Berachimu Sagi,
Supreme righteous one, with a lot of love, abounding love.
Ol Ben Tzadik B'Tzedek,
He enters between righteous and tzaddik and tzedek. Tzedek is here, he translates it also as righteousness, but let's translate it as yesod and uprightness. And thus is protected on all sides. Okay, what
Ishtikach Nutter Mikol Sifton Zakar Man the Nutter Baris Da,
why don't we wait? We'll read that in a moment. Why don't we have Zev read a couple of notes here? Note 90.
Well, the previous note,
It's just a bunch of quotes.
it just expands the quotes. I don't think it's going to add anything
Let's
to
read
what
93, 92.
93. Oh, holy pious one. This paragraph and the next are out of place and fit better with the material appearing below at notes 107 to 116. Whoever guards the covenant of circumcision by avoiding sexual sin places himself behind Shpina, known as righteousness, who leads the way for him. Meanwhile, who protects him from behind, none other than Yesod, known as the righteous one.
Okay, so this little thing that we just read now about the Yesod, like just put it away. We'll come back to it because it really fits in better later. Okay.
Zakar Man the Nutter Baris Da,
Page 86. Happy is the one who preserves this covenant.
V'Adai Yisrael Es Chazan Kol Dechurin, the
Therefore,
Nagranas
all males of Israel who preserve the sign of this covenant appear before the Holy King.
Man Iu Diachel Naskal Levra,
Who can possibly harm a son who's in the middle?
Avur Mikan V'Ime Mikan V'Iu Beinayim,
Father on one side, his mother on the other, and with him in between them.
V'da Kad Iu Achrei Hashem.
That is when he is after God. Okay, that's a verse in Deuteronomy. Let's read the note for that, 94.
Therefore, all the males of Israel should appear at the temple in Jerusalem during the 3 pilgrimage festivals. See Exodus 23:17. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear in the presence of the Lord Hashem. The Divine Father is Yesod, while the mother is Shechina. The full verse in Deuteronomy reads, after Hashem your God shall you go or walk, and him shall you revere, and his commands shall you keep, and his voice shall you heed, and him shall you worship, and to him shall you cleave.
Okay. Come and see.
Tochazeh Hahura Kia Kad Sachara Vilgugula Minagna Beniguna,
When the heaven revolves in rotation, it renders a song, it sings a song.
Umikal Nihimu Demayan Denaven,
And due to the roaring sound of the water, the flowing, gushing water, the melody is not known. In other words, it's the reason why we don't hear that beautiful sound is there are other sounds that get in the interfere with it.
Kolino Nagonan Diba Arba Citron,
All the basins on the 4 sides
Malion Min Viu Demayan Denaven,
are filled by the flow of this water that gushes forth.
Man de Iulago,
whoever is within
Bisrain Citron Kaima Taman.
exists in these two aspects.
Chad b'chedva, the less chedva kahi chedva
One is
b'alma.
with joy that is there's nothing like that joy in the world.
L'kaima ivdu es Hashem
First,
b'sim.
serve God with joy, right? That's a big one. Psalm 100, verse 2.
Chad b'yira, the less
The
techilo
other
kahi
in
b'alma.
fear or awe, unmatched by any awe of this world, to fulfill a verse that says to serve God.
Ivdu es Hashem b'yira.
Yeah. Okay, so we got two verses in Psalms. The second one is in the second chapter of Psalms, verse 11, and they're both the most important mitzvot in a way, loving God and being in awe of Him, because they're the ones that energize all the other mitzvot. One spring of water bubbling from
Is it like the opposite or the thing? And so like it's like happiness and fear instead of like love and fear here. But
well,
we
he
think
does- he
this
uses the
happiness
word
is
joy, yeah.
right.
Um,
I guess that's
how does it read the verse in Hebrew?
Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha.
Yeah,
So
simcha.
maybe there's just no verse. I don't know. Ivdu es Hashem b'ahava.
No, there is v'haptas Hashem Elokecha.
Kecha, yeah.
Yeah, there's both. There's both. So you raise a good point. Why did he particularly use the one for simcha rather than ava? Okay.
Okay. Chad ma'ina de maya de nevia mistar mizrach.
One spring of water bubbling from the east side.
Dahu de amar Yecheskel nevia.
This one is mentioned by the prophet Yecheskel.
Mehai mayana lo yachlan l'sayim shavachal kol b'nei alma.
Concerning this spring, all the people who live in the world can't say enough in its praise.
Asar de isilid tamam listar mizrach.
In the place where it is born on the east side,
Les umka baruma dulay el zerasa v'layatir.
its depth and height is no more than a span. Okay, Zev, you want to read notes 95, 96?
When that heaven above the Garden of Eden or the temple, and the relation between these two realms, see above note 72. According to ancient philosophy, the heavenly spheres generate harmonious music as they move. See a number of sources. Whoever is within the garden or the temple, and then is it also notes 97, yeah?
Yeah.
One spring of water, as described by Ezekiel in his vision of the restored temple in Jerusalem. See Ezekiel 47:1. He, namely Ezekiel's angelic guide, led me back to the entrance of the temple, and look, waters were issuing from below the platform of the temple eastward, since the temple faced east, and the waters were running out under the south wall of the temple at the south of the altar. And on that note, I actually have to excuse myself. I just noticed the time. I'm gonna run over to Mariv.
So why don't we, like finish the, why don't we just, maybe if anyone has any questions.